Welcome back to the Literature Spotlight on Sunday. Yes, we're hitting the books again tonight, and this time with something a little different because it's actually a work in progress by me. Now, most of you know I do hobby writing on the side, pretty much just for my personal amusement. Tabletop, role playing stuff, the occasional weirdly ambitious fanfic project. There was always the ambition to write something serious, but never really the focus, the idea. Yet over the years, I did cook up a set of short stories, and a few Discord pals probably know about this, with a rather tenuous canon between them. A series of misadventures of a Japanese history teacher circa 2017. And damn, that feels like a lifetime ago. Spec Chuck Tingle, genius here. Throbbing pecs and glistening groins. Oh, Branch, I hate to disappoint you, but there will probably not be any sex in this. Sorry, man. Anyway, one night I got bombed out of my skull on a mix of alcohol and caffeine, and word to the wise kids, don't actually try to mix these two. It was a terrible, terrible fucking idea. But anyway, I got the idea to somehow kludge these pieces together. A lot of editing later, I was able to develop an actual through line, a kind of neo-noir identity thriller about this fella, the character on the cover, having a really fucking bad day. Again, very much a work in progress. I'm not even settled on the title. Lord knows I have doubts that I'll ever finish this, but I'm stubborn enough to give it a real try. Tonight's an attempt to see if it sounds as good aloud as it does in my head. I've got about 7 chapters and change written so far of a planned, well, vague outline of like about 16 to 20. I know how it ends, I know how it starts, the challenges working my way between those points. I'll be going over the first 3 or 4 tonight. We'll see how long that takes, and that should give me a framework of the story I'm trying to tell. Hopefully it'll be entertaining as well. Now, the big question, evidenced by the gauge here, is on a scale of 1 to Alan Wake, how much of this character is literally me? And the answer is, kind of a lot. But not necessarily in the ways you think. Besides writing the book itself, part of the challenge is to see if I can take those familiar traits and let them develop organically into something unfamiliar, occasionally doing things I wouldn't do. But of course, you may notice a few things here and there that might seem a little bit familiar, so we'll slide that scale up depending on how blatant it gets allowed and see where we end up. The thresholds, of course, are purely arbitrary. The text in its current cleaned up form has not been uploaded anywhere, so we'll be showing that directly in the top window. You should be seeing that shortly as soon as I toggle this thing here, but this will mostly be an audio stream, so feel free to go into podcast mode. If you have any questions, hit me up and I'll answer as best I can. In the meantime, I bring you a work under the working title of Paper and Missing Chances. Let's gut this turkey. Alright, let's put this on. There we are. Let's zoom in. Chapter 1. Reset. Bad news first. You're probably gonna live through this. That thought was the cherry on top of the shit sundae as he stirred in the car seat. Everything hurt, most of all a piercing pain in his temple. Sustained focus was a chore. He groaned and shifted, spit out a mouthful of airbag, and slowly pushed himself off the steering column. Battered and bruised, he barely noticed the sting of cuts on his face. His own glasses, he soon realized, tugging them down from his forehead. Small miracle they weren't broken, though tears had to be blinked away before he could see again. Nothing felt broken, and a slow pat-down revealed nothing was where it shouldn't be. There was a clotted cut on the arm closest to the window, an unlucky gash that got through his blue jacket, but nothing that wouldn't heal with a bandaging, if he could find any. There was a lot more than could be said for the car, whose front fender was now lodged against a tree. The impact had been hard, with the tree trunk making it a good way into the hood, and broken glass lay scattered like sharp confetti over the passenger seat. Not a minute into this life, and he wanted a new one. "What happened?" he mumbled, not capable of whole sentences just yet. Stars and a half moon shone from a cloudless sky, a cool breeze winding through green and vibrant farmland. Something cricked in his neck as he looked around, then up through the rearview mirror. The path behind him was a car-sized hole through someone's rice crop. Dirt road stitched through the plot. Though he seemingly hadn't taken one in his car's date with a tree. At the moment, nobody was around, which at least meant no angry farmer ready to gut him. On the other hand, that meant nobody could explain anything to him. How he got here, for starters. The inside of his head was a jumbled mess of pain signals and flash-frozen images, none of which cohered into anything useful. Grasping for recollection, he found only guesses and deductions. Obviously, he'd lost control and gone off the road at some point, but which road, and why? Every second brought questions he couldn't answer. Sorry to tell you, but there's worse news, his inner voice chimed in, and he already didn't like where this was going. For now, just focus on getting out of that seat. Off to a running start, he mumbled, fumbling with the seatbelt. I'm already tripping over my own tongue. Hey. His hand brushed against a can of cold coffee, unopened in the cup holder. Please tell me I wasn't drinking. No, we've ruled that out. You'd better take this one slowly. He was increasingly convinced he wasn't about to wake up in bed, sweating over a weirdly realistic dream. The hopes moved on to half-heartedly praying for the car to explode, or some fatal internal injury to get it over with, anything to avoid having to deal with this. To his dismay, life wasn't seeing fit to oblige him. See, you can tell this is a work in progress, so there's going to be things I correct here and there. My apologies. With resignation, he reached for the mirror, only to feel it break off and tumble away as he tried to adjust it. The vanity was his next try, and its lights came on as he flipped it open. Battery still worked, at least. His hair was a brown, tangled mess, green eyes bloodshot, and the eyelids carrying baggage. Yeah. Keep an eye on that meter, folks. One glance at that reddish-purple bruise on his forehead, and he understood why he couldn't remember the crash. He'd taken a hell of a blow. It hurt to look at, let alone touch. From what, though? The car was damaged, and chunks of tree branches had fallen on it, but the airbag had gone off, and the cabin itself was intact. Either he'd bounced around hard on impact, which wasn't impossible, or white-hot pain drilled through the space where thoughts should be, contorting his face in a grimace. One of the pictures came back, time frozen, as if he'd stepped outside it for a moment. Something flashed, lightning-quick movement, a hard blow. Was he remembering or inferring it? All he knew for sure was he had time to turn, and it had barely been enough. He had no idea how lucky he was. The moment was gone just as quickly, leaving him with nothing but the pain. Don't think about it yet. Maybe you can find a first aid kit. Look around. Naturally, that ensured he would, in fact, think about it. With the airbag still in his way, he clawed at the door handle. The lock loosened with a click, but the door struggled to open. It resisted his hands. He had to stretch a leg and tilt enough to put his foot into it. Confident it would yield, he pushed and then kicked, gritting his teeth through the discomfort. Pain rolled out from his knees and back, but after a few tries the door gave way with a metallic shriek. He slid as much as climbed out of the car, wobbling as he got onto his feet. To his mounting distress, nothing looked more familiar on the outside. The distant cell tower with its glowing red beacon offered little comfort, the rice fields and roads telling him he was far out in the sticks. He bunched up his coat, the breeze more pronounced outside the car. How he'd gotten here, what had hit him, where here even was. None of it was clicking. Even the car didn't seem right. Mental gears had slipped where the gray Toyota should have been. A hard lump in his jacket turned out to be a phone, offering a brief glimmer of hope until he tried to enter the code. He stared helplessly at the padlock icon. He had no idea. The clock read 3:19 Monday, 9 October. There were missed calls and voicemail waiting for him. In a rising panic, he combed his mind, looking for numbers that just weren't there. Yeah, about that, his inner voice chimed in, and he got the impression of someone clearing their throat awkwardly. You keep reaching for your name, too, and we're drawing a blank here. You're not consciously thinking about what that means, but it's there and it's, not good. The final straw came from digging his wallet out of his jeans and attempting to read his license by phone light. Hey, Ivory, good to see you. Go ahead and get comfy. There it was, his name at last. Masamoto Haruka, Chiyoda-ku resident, Tokyo, Japan. Date of birth, 16 August 1978. The sleepy smile and tired eyes matched what was in the mirror, but after a moment of staring, he realized nothing had clicked. There was a void where a person should have been. He blinked, stared harder, as if he could somehow will that absence into making sense. It did not. By the way, this counts as consciously thinking about it, so brace yourself. Something worse than physical pain drove through him, an emptiness so acute it became a vacuum, drawing in every fragment of thought it could find. Time seemed to outright stop as his brain shut itself down, a hard reboot that began again with the basics. I am human. I am alive. I am standing in a field next to a car. The operating system worked, the hardware was functional, and despite a mountain of errors, he got to a user interface. There was simply no data to work with. The stranger's face in the license kept smiling at him, tormenting him with that empty space. His legs wobbled and he staggered into the car for support, then slid bonelessly to the ground. His head sank back against the metal, and the little thump reminded him of the intense ache in his skull. Any energy for movement or higher thought was gone, and he was bereft of words for the enormity of what was missing. Ow! Well, almost bereft of words. Sorry, Haruka. It's going to be a long, bad day. So yeah, right away you can tell the internal voice is basically me. So I think we're going to go ahead and bump that arrow up a notch. Let's just get it over with. Elevating to, what is this, Mr. Yang? Greetings from the land of 1972's The Asphyx, a real nothing burger of a dull movie. Oh, man. See, that's a title that sounds like it should be for something cool, like some kind of low-budget horror movie with something incomprehensible, but it's probably just some guy in a suit, or God only knows. You said it's pretty dull, so I'm assuming it's not even that. But hey, Zero, good to see you. So yeah, literally me is off to a rough start of a day. He took a deep drag from the cigarette, its kiss smoky and soothing. The flaming $100 bill fluttered as he waved it, hastening its demise before letting go. It always tasted better this way, addiction framed as a decadent luxury. Basically, Victorian Science Lichdom the movie. Oh, see, yeah, that should kick ass. A concept that good can't suck. That makes it even worse. Hey, anyway, it always tasted better this way. Addiction framed as a decadent luxury. Who cared about amount? Damn it. If I weren't working tomorrow, I'd have liquor for this. Anyway, who cared about the money? A bounce. Jesus Christ, that's a twofer. Who cared about the money? Just print more of it. Sunglasses hid his eyes, but the wolfish smile said more than his words ever would. The partition slid open, revealing a cluster of men around a single table, having a grand old time. A lot of guns and knock-off designer clothes, a lounge lizard's white jacket. They were all too cheap for the real thing. Good enough to be buried in. He didn't give them time to draw, his twin Berettas fully loaded and eager to put an end to this. It was time. He moved like a coiled cobra, taking aim and sinking 9mm fangs into jacket. The guard at the door was next. Someone drew their piece at last. Didn't matter who. His brother would be a vet. Not to interrupt, Chow Yun Fat, but we're pretty sure you've never held a gun in your life. It felt fitting that he was having better luck with trivia. Thanks, Brain. Nice hustle, he muttered, spreading an antibiotic and a bandage. Look, we're doing the best we can. Anyway, that's gonna sting. Keep pushing through it. A cold and viscous pain seared into his forehead, making him hiss as he pushed down the bandage. The wound was a touch more serious than a bump on the noggin, if the memory loss was any indication. His arm was easier to wrap up, a minor cut that barely got through his teal... That should be blue. That barely got through his blue windbreaker. He needed help in many ways, and based on his surroundings, he'd have to walk to get it. Fortunately, his thoughts hadn't been wrong yet. He wouldn't say he was in good shape, but walking was still an option. While finding the car's first aid kit, he tried to guess what had happened, and when those came up short, he moved on to elaborate fantasies. Hey, Orange. Welcome to the House of Fun. Get comfy. Seconds had dragged as he'd coped with reality before him, 10 real minutes working out to like an hour in his mind. Unfortunately, the extra time hadn't given him any wisdom, nor useful scraps of memory to work with. So let's review, he said to himself, turning sideways in the driver's seat and swinging his legs back out. I took a bad hit to the head, wrecked my car trying to get somewhere, and now I can't remember anything. Where do I even start with this? A hospital would be wise. He was getting used to these little self-interjections. Obviously, but I mean, after that, what in the world did I do to myself? As far as we can tell, it's just a bad accident. Maybe with a really weird midlife crisis on the side. Going from the birth date on his license, he had turned 39 2 months ago. There was no ring on his finger to worry about, and he was starting to see why. At least nobody would be waiting for him. Lucky me, he muttered. One problem at a time, old man. Let's take some aspirin, down it with the coffee. Something about that idea struck a chord with him. The siren song of the day starter beverage. Still sealed, the can of Boss coffee in the cup holder beckoned wordlessly, a treat meant for later that he needed yesterday. He reached over to the passenger seat and grabbed the pill bottle from the first aid kit. This is probably healthy, he said dryly, popping the bottle top and shaking a couple white pills into his hand. Can't make it much worse, I guess. He tossed the pills into his mouth and then cracked open the can, bringing it up to his lips. The first splash against his tongue sent sparks of delight through his brain. The brew no longer chilled, but still with its caffeinated payload. What started as a sip became a chug, then a desperate attempt to drain the can. The pills were easily washed down his throat by that blessed, beautiful beverage, and he devoted all thought into truly savoring the moment. It was probably the last good one he was going to have for a while. He set down the empty can and closed his eyes, soothed for a time. Why am I bothering to get up again? He asked. sensing that the answers he needed were a long way off. Curiosity, partly, but it also seems to be self-justifying. You get up because you... where's that coming from? You can tell some of this was written when I was not entirely focused. You get up because you need a reason not to. And this doesn't count. Pain's not enough. Everything hurts. Has for a long time. Just get up and keep moving. That bought enough time for the coffee to work its magic. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a cartoon sailor was downing a can of spinach and flexing. With a hand on the door frame, he pulled himself upright, complaints coming in from all corners of his body. It all felt sore and past its use-by date, some parts worse than others, and he cursed under his breath as he nursed his aching back. Whoever he had been, he hoped that person had a jacuzzi at home. And yet, it felt good to stand, to take stock from outside the car. He had clarity of thought in all his fingers and toes. His innards were where they should be, his license, his phone. The pain wasn't debilitating, and the crackle of caffeine put some life back into him. Whatever had happened to him, he lived, and he stood a good chance of getting that life back. Maybe even changing it, building something new with the old parts. Some core part of his being simply cracked its knuckles, eager to start on the blank slate before him. Nobody could turn back the clock, but he was pretty sure time was on his side when he needed it the most. Maybe that's how he got lucky in the first place. Let's focus on the present. Don't forget the keys. Haruka risked more complaints from his back as he reached back into the car. A bit of fumbling and a twist and the keys came loose, and to his relief he seemed to recognize how they felt. Nothing stood out besides the worn-down lock and unlock buttons, but somehow the texture triggered a flash of insight, a thought sparking from deep in his brain. 0451. Beg your pardon? One of the guys just had an idea for your phone. Try 0451. Noting the mention of a group, Haruka got his phone back out and thumbed up to the lock screen. Something about that number did stand out to him, but he couldn't explain why. Sadly, it did no good. Yep, that's the one, Orange. Sadly, it did no good. The padlock icon continued to mock him. On a whim, he tried the number in reverse, but got no further. Damn. Sorry, Professor. Was worth a try. Professor? That rang a bell. A painful one. A knife twisting in his soul and making him wince. Was that my job? An educated guess. We should get moving. Haruka delayed his departure long enough for one last look at the car, feeling a pang of guilt. He placed his hand on the hood and closed his eyes, listening to her through that scratched and dented texture. The battered metal was cool to the touch, and his hand curled into a fist as he imagined her chaotic final moments. She'd kept him safe, and he'd brought her nothing but trouble. Gently bumping twice, he hung his head in gratitude and apology. On some level, he knew she wasn't the first woman he'd failed. Even so, he could sense the old girl wishing him luck. He was going to need it. He pushed himself upright and looked around, scanning the wilderness with a wary eye. A dirt road scarred with tire tracks offered the nearest hope of a direction. Okay, he sighed, clapping and rubbing his palms together. This jostled his injured left arm, and he hissed through the sting, rubbing over the bandages. Hospital. Let's mosey. You could call 119 without unlocking the phone, you know. Ambulance would take a while to get here. I'll see if I can find a convenience store or something. Time continued its odd stretching act as he set off, following the tracks and losing himself in thought. Hours of rumination were drawn from 30 minutes of walking, the air just breezy enough to offset the humidity. Sweat was threatening his shirt by the first signs of civilization. He followed a dirt road to pavement, and then the first houses of some rural township, the caffeine helping him keep a steady pace. This was all going to cost him at some point, but he borrowed the energy from then and kept moving. After all that thinking, his brain couldn't reach any hard conclusions, getting off topic several times. He wondered in terms of table odds which was more likely, some kind stranger giving him a lift or getting picked up by the cops. This led to thoughts of what he feared, and he was surprised to find that death wasn't highest on the list. That he might be imagining all this while dying was a notch higher. I think, therefore I am came up at some point, lending credence to the teacher theory. Close to the top was the fear of making someone worry about him, though that didn't seem likely at the moment. Death of personality, on the other hand. There his thoughts lingered for a good long while. He shivered through his coat at the thought, wondering if everything he was had disappeared, the lights on but someone else at home. Small wonder he hadn't collapsed in a field already, a gibbering lunatic in the face of an ontological nightmare. Yet as he reached the nearest subdivision, he again found in himself a perverse anticipation. His thoughts ran in all directions at once, already hard at work on the mystery. Briefly, he contemplated shouting for help, but if the thought said it'd be rude to cause a ruckus at 4 in the morning when he was perfectly capable of walking. All this told him that whatever strange behavior had led here had seemed to persist through the accident. For now, that passed for comfort. Gotta be a store around here somewhere, he reasoned aloud, pressing on. I'll clean up and call from there. Sure enough, another 10 minutes gifted him with the glow of a 7-Eleven, at the cost of feet that could use a break. Clearly his beat-up running shoes had seen their share of pavement. He wasn't alone. Some early riser had parked a bicycle outside the store. The doors slid open as he approached, and he wound up sidestepping around a young woman leaving. Haruka excused himself with a little bow of the head, and he sensed her doing a double take, as if she'd noticed the bandaging. The 20-something clerk did a better job of hiding his surprise, merely a quirk of the brow as the older man approached. Fortunately, there wasn't anybody else in the store to stop and stare. Sorry, it's been a rough morning, Haruka explained with a sheepish smile. Can I use your bathroom, please? The boredom of third shift won out over concern, and the youth shrugged and pointed to a sign in the corner. Haruka bowed his head and turned, making his way through rows of snacks, magazines, instant meals. His eyes passed longingly over a hot coffee dispenser. Slipping into the single-toilet restroom, he felt that his night in the woods had helped him truly appreciate indoor plumbing and air conditioning. He finished up and washed his hands, listening to the store speaker through the door. It was some acoustic piece, a soft and catchy mix of guitars and horns, a slow bass beat that could get his toes tapping. Sadly, the face in the mirror still belonged to a stranger, one whose problems were just beginning. Don't give up, Tequila. We'll get through this. Finish up and let's call for help. Haruka murmured in agreement, avoiding thoughts about where Tequila had come from. He turned away from the sink, then abruptly spun in place, hands whipping out dual-wield finger pistols at the mirror. Safety's off. We've got this, he grinned. Agony lanced through his skull, reminding him the wound on his head wasn't healing any faster. Ow, 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 ow! Okay, time to call. He had just stepped out of the restroom when suddenly the phone buzzed in his jacket, an electric warbling that startled him and got his attention. Hopes rose as he got the phone out, banking on someone that might know him personally. Junsei, he read on the screen. His thoughts pulled an all-nighter in the seconds between rings, figuring out what to say and how much to give away. Were they a friend? A relative? Someone he owed money? The coffee and aspirin breakfast roiled in his stomach, ready to punch right back up. He had no idea how to explain the trouble he was in. Still, they were his best bet at getting help, and learning anything about what had happened to him. He'd have to be plain about it. Hopefully, they were a patient sort. He picked up and put on his best ordinary voice, like he wasn't an amnesiac stuck at a C-store at 4 in the morning. Moshi moshi, Masumoto Haruka, he said. Amongst his mental counsel, a lone voice wondered why this Junsei was calling so early. There you are. Been trying to get a hold of you all night. The voice was male, casual but clipped. He sounded like he already knew something was amiss. You okay, man? That's a complicated subject, said Haruka, being evasive. I'm up and walking, but I have a problem here. Kind of a few problems. Yeah, you don't know the half of it. Listen, I checked on that car you were worried about. Turns out it was a rental. The guy was covering his tracks. I couldn't get a name, but Reiko thinks it's got something to do with your ex-girlfriend. He blinks. Reiko? Ex-girlfriend? Is Junsei a cop or something? This was far too much information without context. She saw them parked at Yoshihara's office. We should probably talk about the rest in person. They still following you? No, I don't think so. The details were throwing him off, adding confusion he didn't need. He summoned a stronger voice and spoke more plainly. Listen, Junsei, something real bad happened tonight. I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, everything hurts, and I can't remember how I got out here or what I was doing. It deflated him to get the words out, an out-loud acknowledgement of his surreal experience. His legs wobbled and he leaned against a wall for support. From what he could surmise, Junsei was someone he trusted with complicated matters. In the back of his mind, a brief image of a well-connected fellow in a suit. Concern, shock, or disbelief would make sense. What the man actually said did not. Haruka stood there for a long moment with the phone to the ear. Time had frozen once more to let his mind catch up. For the first time since waking up, he began to understand himself, and he was starting to fear what he was learning. When everything was allowed to move, he sputtered a bit in his reply, incredulous and, of all things, irritated. I'm sorry. What do you mean, did it happen again? So yeah, based on the internal voice, I think we can safely move that arrow up to elevated. Let us move that to, okay, but hear me out, what if I solve crimes? Yeah, the Disco Elysium influence is very strong in that chapter. Although the tequila was actually a reference to Hard Boiled, and I believe the scene I described was actually from Better Tomorrow. Anyway, Chapter 2, Collapse. Saturday, 16 September 2017. 3 weeks before the crash. Everything hurt. He just kept moving. It had begun as an aimless stroll away from the cafe, away from a warm smile and caring words. He'd hopped on a train in something of a daze and headed north, no destination in mind. At some point he got off and broke into a jog, and like a snowball rolling downhill, it picked up steam, becoming a desperate run like his life depended on it. The city had sped by, alleys and fences turned into shortcuts. He might have crossed a rooftop at one point. His legs sure complained like it. He could have fallen and broken something. Again. Whatever had come over him made a 30-something run like he was still 15. Muscles had ached as he hauled himself over one obstacle after another, the pain only fueling his drive to keep moving at all costs. He finally ran out of steam in one of the city's shrinking suburbs, collapsing in a park and barely able to move. An arm draped loosely over bespectacled eyes, shielding them from the setting sun. Not a square inch of him didn't feel battered and worn, his lungs drawing air in ragged, heaving gasps. She'd meant every kind word, and that just made it hurt more. For the moment, not much else mattered. Eventually, he summoned the energy to sit up. His back felt 10 years older than the rest of his body, which wasn't exactly in mint condition either. Caked in sweat and grime from his mad sprint, he frowned as he tried to get his bearings. A wallet cushioned a set of car keys in one pocket, a phone waiting in the other. His autopilot had taken him somewhere he didn't recognize, though the phone still had a healthy charge to it. A poke at the map told him where he was, and his eyes, tired as they were, nearly popped out of their sockets. Koshigaya? God. It was a good 40 minutes by train from Adachi. He couldn't even fathom the route he'd taken, but it had cost him several hours, none of which he could remember. If he weren't utterly exhausted, it might have frightened him. Still struggling for air, he could only imagine what others saw. A maniac seemingly running himself to death, maybe someone wondering if that was that bland, forgettable teacher they once had. The meeting had scrambled his mind, pushed a panic button he didn't know he'd had. A smiling face, the same beautiful eyes he'd fallen for in college, that laugh, all of it so tantalizingly close yet across an unbridgeable gulf. He still remembered how it felt to hold her. The details were coming back, stinging where his exhaustion couldn't reach. It had been their first conversation in over a decade, getting a light lunch at some trendy cafe. She'd moved on with her life, had a career, a family, a future, and wished him well with his. He was happy for her. It wasn't her fault the truth hurt. "You were right the first time," he said to himself, his voice like he gargled with gravel in the morning. Fingers struggled to stay steady as he tapped out a message to an old friend, one of the few he trusted in moments like this. "Vienna?" He didn't have to wait long for a reply. "Of course. What's up?" The code phrase was borrowed from a movie. It was a silly way of making sure the other wasn't busy. It was fun to pretend. "Tough day. Long story. Got time for drinks?" "Be free in about an hour. Where you at?" "Koshigaya. It's a bit of a ride. Better meet by you." He rose to his feet and looked around. Ay, ay, ay. Repetition, ever my bane. He rose to his feet and looked around, squinting. The park was sparsely populated, a scattering of trees with a threading of footpaths. One jogger glanced at him in passing, but kept going. He'd have to push himself further for alcohol. His stomach rumbled as well, suggesting he hadn't gotten much out of lunch. "Why? Weren't you meeting Yoshihara today?" The reminder jabbed at an old wound. "I did." The first step wobbled. He was going to pay for this tomorrow. Had to be a noodle shop or something he could hit up first. Yikes. That bad, huh? Sort of. Where's convenient for you? "Man, you fucked up. I sure did." Haruka tipped the bottle back and took a greedy swallow. Cheap domestic beer wouldn't do much for his bodily abuse, but it was a relief to his parched throat. To judge from the full house, there wasn't much local competition for entertainment. The clientele mostly looked to be commuters wrapping up their own long days. Occasional shouts of "Kampai" peppered the air, backed by the beats of some pop group singing in English on the jukebox. Pizzicato 5, he guessed. Seated next to him, Tamura Junsei had the look of the shifty fellow nobody really trusted. Dark suit jacket that didn't quite fit, a grin made for mischief, sunglasses tucked into his dress shirt collar. About the only thing sharp was his haircut, freshly trimmed and slicked back. He might as well have carried a neon sign reading "Legitimate Businessman." Strangely enough, most of his business was legitimate these days. Easiest way to keep the cops off their back. Haruka knew him better. Back in high school, the delinquent look was a clever disguise for a math nerd that got tired of being picked on. At some point, the mask got comfortable. He'd washed out of finance, leveraged a few connections, and ended up clerking for a construction company. Still, those old talents made him sharper than the average goon, and he always seemed to know a guy that knows a guy. If the end of the world was tomorrow, he'd be the second person Haruka called. The first, of course, would be campus reception to apologize for being late that day. Jinsei patted his lips with the cuff of his jacket. So you're saying you could have been married to a member of the Diet? No, no. Well, not quite. I mean, maybe. We might have... Haruka trailed off and shook his head, starting over. She's part of the Tokyo Assembly, but there's talk of a lower house seat opening up this year. LDP's looking for options, and her name's on the list. Huh. Well, good for her, I guess. Don't really follow politics that much. When in doubt, vote the hare, the teacher said dryly. It's led me down the least since Koizumi. That earned a smirk from his drinking partner. I'll save that one for my boss. He had a few friends in office back then. Probably wishes he still did. Why? What's going on? Yeah, boring work stuff. Trying to bid on a construction project in Saitama. Kobayashi Real Estate is throwing a lot of money around all of a sudden. The accountant looked around and lowered his voice somewhat. Kind of a snake, but boss thinks he can close the deal. You don't sound convinced, said Haruka, noting the irony of a criminal being picky. Let's just say if I shook his hand, I'd count my fingers afterward. Jinsei set his bottle down, a quiet moment in the crowd making the clink louder than normal. He threw a look at his friend and changed the subject. Anyway, what did go down between you and Yoshihara? You never did tell me the whole story. Haruka emptied the rest of his drink with a long pull. He tried to tell himself that it was just words, yet they were enough to send him off running until he collapsed or hit ocean. The tired teacher was carrying a sign of his own, undoubtedly not a flattering one. There's a lot to tell, he sighed, sliding his empty bottle away. I'll try to keep it simple. Yoshihara Aki is a career politician, and I don't mean that as an insult. She knows her district and its issues, campaigned hard for the assembly seat, and is genuinely a good person. I'd vote for her, I really would. How'd you two meet? Asked Junsei, finishing his own drink. We go back a ways. I met her in high school. It was actually blind luck we went to the same college. Haruka twisted in his seat as one of his muscles cramped up. She was attractive, witty, whip smart, and she knows how to talk to people, how to explain stuff without making you feel dumb for not knowing it. She understands, the world is complicated. People are messy and weird, and you still have to try. The bartender hovered nearby, smelling an opportunity. Both men signaled for another round. I worked up the nerve to approach her my junior year at college. Babbled like an idiot, but she said yes, God knows why. His voice took on a far-off quality, the pleasant memory bleeding into his tone. He even smiled a bit. Things were great for a while. Had a lot in common, a lot of the same interests. Did dumb couple stuff. A lot of karaoke. She's got a great singing voice. A politician that understands people, definitely fiction. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, you can tell this is not quite real. But anyway, yeah. A lot of karaoke. She's got a great singing voice. Better than Reiko covering Joan Jett. He had to stop and think about that. A mutual friend, of a sort, who put some real fight into I hate myself for loving you. Maybe. It'd be close. Junsei leaned back in his stool, arms folded, and a look of mild surprise on his face. Sorry, I'm just having a hard time seeing you with a crush on someone. You're being real here, aren't you? You think there was something there? I mean, I'm not going to say things got serious, but they were headed in that direction. The man was wistful and lost, his head lowering slightly. So I thought. Maybe it was just me. Fresh bottles tapped down to the bar, hissing as the bartender popped them open. Thanks, said Junsei, smiling up at her. What happened? She wanted to go on to graduate school, so she was putting in some serious hours. The teacher paused for a long sip, soothing his busy throat. Finals came up, and we were apart for a good week or so. Feels like that's when little things started changing. Not quite as affectionate. Longer silent moments. More plans put off or canceled entirely. And I thought I'd done something to offend her. Maybe I did and never noticed. I don't know. That's weird. I mean, if you two got along that well, did she say anything at all? Well, one day she calls me out for lunch, and by then I'm expecting the worst. Light from a television glinted off his glasses, the eyes watching a few droplets trickle back down the inside of the bottle. He looked tense in the shoulders, braced for a pain now decades old. Sure enough, she got accepted and wanted to focus on her PhD. And I know, long-distance relationships are trouble, but I was still worried it was personal and asked if she was positive we couldn't make it work. Shifting in his seat, Junsei was unnerved at the subtle changes in Haruka's expression. The last time he saw something similar, a man had to be talked off a roof. What was her answer? Well, you know the saying, how a gaffe in politics is when someone unintentionally tells the truth? Haruka clenched his jaw, reliving the moment. Such small things, and yet the scars went deep. She admitted she wants someone more outgoing, a little more fun and not so quiet all the time, and, fair enough, that's just not me. And she said she just felt she'd be better off on her own. The accountant cringed in sympathy. Oof, so much for breaking it off gently, huh? He was calm, but there was a hint of venom in his voice. She apologized right away, Haruka quickly added. I was still reeling when she panicked and saying that came out wrong. As she meant we were going in different directions, wanted different things. Of course, me being me, I try to wave it off. People say dumb things, right? But it's like trying to undrop a bomb. It stays with you, messes with you. Pfft, fuck it, man, you're better off. Junsei went for another sip, waving dismissively with his free hand. Doesn't pay to look back, believe me. That's the hell of it, Jun. She called up a few weeks ago. Wanted to meet again and catch up. Hadn't heard from her in years, and she said she wasn't happy with how we left things. He blinked, his brow creased in confusion. The detail complicated the image he was building of her. Huh. So that's what today was? She wanted to apologize? Exactly. I think I was too stunned to say no. The teacher inhaled deeply, fighting against the tightness in his chest. We met for lunch. She came right out and said she's sorry about the whole thing and how she wished she'd handled it better. It had been eating her up for years and she felt awful about it. Wow. So what'd you say? What could I say? I told her it was water under the bridge. We talked for a while. She ran for office, got married, worked on this or that project. Even so, she was worried about me. His voice cracked a bit, sounding like some small and distant thing, and it just hits me. Here she was, happy, successful, a genuinely wonderful person with her whole career ahead of her. And then there was me. Though sturdier than he looked, the teacher wasn't a large man. It was his mind, his voice, that gave him a presence in the classroom. Bottomless empathy in a comforting register. Absent those, he was about as imposing as a lame dog, limping and sad-eyed, just looking for a spot where he wouldn't be underfoot. Oh, man. Need a break from tainted grail, huh? Well, good to have you here, Kren. Going through some serious business here as well, but settle in, get comfy. Junsei saw something more than just the pain of love lost. The man looked defeated, and there was no one to blame for it but the face in the mirror. Maybe not even him. She was right all along, said Haruka glumly, hunching over the counter. He looked to lay his head down and never get back up. She found her place in life because she left me. Come on, you can't think like that. The accountant was hardly one for pep talks. The role is typically the opposite. Undaunted, he clapped a hand to his friend's shoulder and shook him gently, trying to swerve him away from a ditch of self-pity. You know it's not that simple. Haruka shut his eyes and buried his face in his hands, pushing up his glasses. Just hurts is all, he mumbled through his palms, massaging his temples. A sharp sniff. He uttered the closest thing to a sob that he'd made in at least a decade. Just hurts. I get it, man, said Junsei, in a softer tone than he could usually muster. Sometimes you try your best and you still lose. Sometimes you feel something special and they don't. It's just how it happens. It ain't fair, I know. What's the point then? Why bother? Because you don't know you're going to fail, Haru. You could spend a lifetime asking the what-ifs, but there's no knowing for sure. It was his turn to sound bitter, more honesty in his words than he was comfortable with. We're all just stumbling in the dark, trying to make this hell we call life more tolerable. Sometimes it hurts, man. Often it never stops hurting. We get up and try anyway, 'cause... shit. What else are we gonna do? Sit here and wait for the end? There was no immediate reply, which looked close enough to progress to push back a bit more. There aren't a lot of answers out there, and most of them you gotta find yourself. But there are two questions I ask myself every day. He snatched his beer off the counter, gesturing to the teacher with the neck of the bottle. What's really bothering you? And what are you going to do about it? Silence settled between them, the chatter of the bustling bar filling the void. Couples drinking, locals commiserating, a team of commuting workers with glasses raised in a toast. Haruka found himself jostled by a passing patron who quickly apologized, and he waved her off with a quiet, "It's fine." The teacher looked to his friend and then to his beer, thought for a moment, then took a long sip to help form a reply. "Dig deep, man," Junsei pressed. "What's really bothering you?" Haruka's mouth opened, but he hesitated, and he looked to shrink in the bar stool, to shrink into the bar stool. "I'm scared," he feebly admitted, the words spoken as if it were cursed. "Scared that I won't feel that for someone else. Scared that you only get one shot, one real shot. And if you miss that..." The accountant didn't need Haruka to finish the sentence. Much as he wanted to say otherwise, both men knew that happiness was promised to no one. It was earned. It was found. It was fought for. And in the end, it was sometimes lost anyway. Chaos. Love was chaos. Maybe that's why Junsei never got along with it. Still, there was relief in honesty, and Haruka sat up straighter, as if the weight was a bit more manageable. Junsei half smiled, patting his shoulder. "There, was that so hard?" Haruka scoffed, rubbing an eye dry. Excruciating. A note-perfect deadpan was the sign that his mood was on the mend. "I don't know that word, so I assume it means, I feel much better. Thank you, Junsei, the coolest and smartest of my friends." He couldn't keep from grinning as he continued. "You're a personal role model and a source of inspiration." There it was, a corner of Haruka's mouth crooking upward, however reluctantly. "Dick," he muttered. Score 1 for the math nerd. "So they call me. The question now," Junsei tilted his head slightly, gesturing with his bottle, "is what are you going to do about it?" Weary eyes wandered, stealing a glance at the TV to check the time. "For now," Haruka began, the rest of his mouth helping out with a smile. "It didn't last, but he tried. I'm going to finish my drink, and maybe have another." That got a chuckle and a raised bottle in salute. Not a bad place to start. The train car trembled as it took the turn, the tracks ahead bending towards downtown Tokyo. Sunlight was a distant memory, a sliver over the horizon as office lights and digital signs took over. A highway ran below, following the train for a time before drifting off in its own direction. It was all busy and tired, a city with miles to go before it slept. Or maybe Haruka just felt that way. Alcohol and exhaustion pushed his energy to a negative value, yet somehow he still stood, clinging to the pole. He knew the second he sat down he wasn't getting back up. The partition of his thoughts dedicated to schoolwork was already on Monday, and he had a brief panic as he forgot that it was the weekend. Panic was good. It kept him awake. "How you holding up, old man?" asked Junsei, hovering near the doors. By Tokyo standards, the train was empty, though that mostly meant it wasn't standing room only. "I'll manage," Haruka muttered, sober enough to keep his voice down. "Just gonna get home and crash. It was a long week to begin with." "Students giving you a hard time?" He shook his head. "Nah, a lot of construction by the apartment. They're replacing gas lines. It's just a hassle getting in and out." "I know that feeling. You sure you're gonna be alright?" Junsei appraised him quickly. His stop was up next, but he was loath to leave until he knew Haruka would get home safely. Those heavy eyelids closed, his chest filling with fresh air. Drinking hadn't gotten him any closer to acceptance, no grand revelation that made it okay. Still, there was value in naming the pain, accepting it. Junsei was right. There were no easy answers to be found, just the hard struggle to keep moving day after day. Somehow, he kept moving. "I'll be fine," he said, doing his best to mean it. "Thanks, by the way, for coming out, for listening. It helped to talk." Junsei tapped 2 fingers to his head in salute. "Anytime, brother." A chime signaled their approach to the next station, followed by a canned dual-language announcement. "Oh, almost forgot. Reiko told me to say hi." Haruka half smiled, gazing out the window as the car crawled up to the platform. "Hi, Reiko. Tell her to stay out of trouble, would you?" "I'll do that. You should give her a call sometime. She had fun when we all went to karaoke." "Yeah, she had fun laughing at me covering September," the teacher scoffed, then added, "It'd just be awkward. Besides, I like my thumbs where they are." "Cowards die 1,000 deaths, Haru," Jinsei teased. A few riders bunched up near the doors, forcing him to move a bit. His voice sobered up quickly than the rest of him. his eyes clear as he added, "For real, man. Life is worth living, even on your second try." The car stopped. The doors slid open with a pop and a hiss. Oh, another typo there. Haruka had no rejoinder, simply nodding to the platform. "Go on, get out of here. I'll catch you later." Junsei gave a crooked grin, racking up another minor victory. "See ya." Haruka stepped aside to let others pass. Junsei disappeared into the cluster of passengers, one hand in his pocket and the other giving a backwards wave. The teacher answered it, and another chime preceded the doors closing. A thinner crowd was left as the platform rolled away, and his eyes wandered back to the city lights again. They closed for a moment's rest, and he read the movement of the train, felt every tremble and twist. He didn't travel this line often, but it told a familiar story of the city sprawl, of the daily grind and lives gone by. It could almost lull him to sleep, and nearly did, the man slumping briefly against the side wall. The motion jabbed him in the thigh with something sharp, jolting him upright. He winced, felt around, and found the offender. A handful of jagged metal in his pocket, hooked together with rings. The teacher squinted, then frowned, the Toyota logo making the motor of his brain turn over. Finally, with a smack of a palm to his forehead, it came to life. The keys stuck uselessly out from his fist. "Right," he sighed. "I drove to lunch." Chapter 3. Observation. Wednesday, 11 October 2017. Present day. "Can you name the current Prime Minister?" "Abe Shinzo. I remember losing a bet about how long he'd last." He spoke with barely a trace of humor, the words a clinical statement of recall. Since the ambulance ride from the store, Haruka had spent most of the last 48 hours unconscious. Waking moments were surreal and short, a battery of tests punctuated by lackluster hospital food. Follow the light, write and recite, count backwards from 20. The blow to his head had given his brain a good rattle. So far today he'd felt more lucid, and had given answers to his doctor's satisfaction. What they could tell him was less satisfying. He'd been transferred to another hospital at some point, further downtown. And when he came to, the staff had a rundown of the beating he'd taken. Yet no one had answers for the cause of it, or why some university professor had crashed his car late at night in someone's rice field. As a patient on file, he had an address, a medical history, and an occupation, but that left a lot of open space in his life. The last month in particular seemed lost in an impenetrable fog. The gray-haired doctor at his bedside made a few notes on a tablet, her masked face giving away little. "Thank you, Masamoto-san, that'll be enough," she said. "The good news is your CT scan showed no abnormalities, and your cognitive ability and motor skills seem unaffected. The injury appears to have been from a blunt object, but the abrasion ran across your forehead. Despite how it looked, it was probably a glancing blow from whatever hit you. In short, you were incredibly lucky." His head wound had been reduced to a dull throb, though the bruise was taking its time healing. He reached for a glass of water, mindful of the bandaging on his arm. He tried not to bother it, tried not to look at it. Fortune had taken a peculiar shape in his life. "Your blood test showed signs of painkiller use, but BAC was normal. There's a note from another physician. Where was it?" The doctor scrolled up on her device, scanning with a gloved fingertip. Here. "You seem to have abnormal resistance to medication. Your last few prescriptions were stronger than normal for your height and weight. There are no active prescriptions on record, however, likely not a factor in your accident. Medical freak of nature, but a very mild one. Somehow, that checks out." His mental form had stuck around through it all, helping him scrutinize every little thing, and drawing out his headache. If he'd always been like this, then the apparent arc of his life was starting to make more sense. "Have you been able to recall anything else?" The weary teacher set the glass down, then glanced at her name tag for a reminder. "Sunohara Chika, neurology. Well, nothing new from the night of the crash. Some things are coming back, like where I grew up and graduated. I think I got my phone code figured out." He paused for breath, mouth crinkling in bitter amusement. "The bet was with a coworker, 50,000 yen. Random stuff like that." Sunohara nodded, tapping out further notes. "What's the most recent thing you remember clearly?" Nothing that helps much." His brow knit for a moment as he tried to pierce the fog, grasping at shadows. "Mom's birthday was last month. The 10th, I think. I cooked her dinner, some kind of pasta. That's about it, I'm afraid." "It's all right. Every detail you do recall is a positive sign." Her voice lay on the boundary of gentle and clinical, and empathy hardened by experience. "While you suffered a concussion, based on our tests, you don't appear to have any lasting damage. This bodes well for your recovery." "How long do you think that might take?" There was a barely visible twitch through the mask, as if her lips pressed into a flat line. That can be quite variable. There's likely some lingering trauma for the accident, and the preceding events are still unclear. I wouldn't want to set expectations. Haruka hung his head slightly. Of course. That does not mean it won't return, however, the doctor quickly added. In my experience, successful recall is more likely when associated with personal or abstract connections, conversations with friends or family, familiar sensory input. Even simply being in your home is likely to help. You did have a couple of visitors while you were recovering, by the way. Right, one of the nurses told me Junsei was here. Their phone call had ended abruptly, with Haruka stumbling through his explanation and swearing to call back. Junsei seemed to know him, and would be as good a place to start as any. Who was the other one? One of your coworkers, I believe. I'm sorry, I don't have his name. Reception should be able to tell you. Alright, I'll ask on the way out. Speaking of which, how soon am I being released? Barring any further issues, you should be out of here today. I'd advise taking time off work to recover and avoid any strenuous activity. Something about the phrase time off work stung in Haruka's mind, making him wince through a grunt. Sunohara heard the noise and looked up from her tablet, concerned. Are you alright, Masamoto-san? I think so, he said, uncertain. I'm still feeling a pretty strong headache. He didn't know what to make of this sensation, but the very topic seemed to touch a tender spot. I understand. Try not to rush things as you return to your routine. I'll be making a referral to a specialist. Please schedule a consultation if your troubles continue for more than a week. I will. Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate the help. A knock at the door got their attention. Pardon the interruption, a voice greeted politely as the door opened, not waiting for a reply. In walked a pair of men dressed for business, a stout and wiry duo in dark coats and designer shoes. The bigger fellow led the way with a formal smile, showing wrinkles around the eyes, while his younger companion covered his with sunglasses and lingered near the doorway. The folder under his arm telegraphed the tenor of the conversation to come. Good cop and bad cop? Haruka wondered. Maybe. No points for guessing which is which. Sunohara-san? Asked the stout one. The receding hairline spoke of a man well into his career, but those blue eyes had a sharpness to them, and they went to Haruka first. The doctor rose to her feet, restrained annoyance in her tone. Yes, excuse me, I'm consulting with a patient right now. That's why we're here. Detective Hasagawa Ryoma, the 7th Precinct. There was an obligatory bow of the head, followed by a quick, practiced showing of a badge. It's about your patient, Masamoto Haruka. The doctor knit her brow and moved closer. Their voices softened to hushed tones. The matter was clearly sensitive. Haruka kept a wary watch, but couldn't pick up any specifics. Something was shown from the folder, and his name came up a few times. Ryoma kept his focus on the doctor, while his partner glanced over at Haruka as well. The latter's slick-backed hair could have been grown in a lab for salarymen, but the sunglasses were an odd choice for the cloudy day outside. He tried to disappear into the mattress, a churning in his gut making him glad he hadn't eaten lunch yet. His thoughts put words to the feeling. You're about to learn something you might not like, boss. After a long half-minute, Ryoma turned to his partner and the doctor addressed Haruka. Forgive me, Masamoto-san. I have to see another patient. The detective has some questions for you. Her bedside manner had shifted subtly, the apology stilted and strained. She gave Ryoma a quick side-eye when he wasn't looking. A nurse will be along shortly for a final checkup. Please use the call button if you need anything. Of course. Thank you, Haruka nodded, picking up the subtle weight on anything. At that, Sunohara took her leave. The closing of the door made louder in the brief silence. Dress shoes clicked on tiles as the detective approached, giving Haruka a better look at each. Ryoma kept a smile up, but his heart wasn't in it. Decorum gave way to authority, crisp and firm. If not for the partner staring intently, the teacher might well have forgotten who was supposed to be the good cop. Masamoto-san, he began, still with a touch of formality. I understand you've been through a terrible accident. The doctor tells me you're having trouble with your memory. You could say that, said Haruka cautiously. What can I do for you, detective? The two exchanged looks, Ryoma giving a little nod. We've been investigating the cause of the accident since it was reported. There's some details we need to confirm, if you're feeling well enough, of course. Everything slowed for a heartbeat, and his thoughts ran in a dozen directions. Speaking to police without a lawyer seemed like a good way to go from a hospital bed to a jail cell. Even if this wasn't a trap, it was impossible to tell what it was. A minority of his thoughts went further, wondering how easy it would be to get fake badges. Paranoia, perhaps, but something in their words felt rehearsed, and the skinny guy looked especially ready for trouble. On the other hand, the night was still a black hole in his brain, swallowing and twisting everything close by. Whatever had happened, he was in no position to say much, true or not. He needed something to go on, and even questions could give answers of a sort. Besides, "I don't know" would hardly be lying at the moment. Time righted itself, and he sighed, sitting up straighter on the bed. "Well enough to talk. Maybe not enough to help. Did you find the car?" Oof. Throat getting dry. "We're still searching for it. Before the accident, you were last seen heading eastbound out of Chiba." Ryoma signaled to his partner, who approached and handed over the folder. He sifted through the contents and produced a photo of the car in question, parked at some office building. "Can you confirm that this is the vehicle?" The make and license plate left him little room to maneuver. He swallowed, feeling guilty again. It pained him to think of the poor girl left behind out there. "Yeah, that's mine. Or at least, that's the car I woke up in." "That's a ways out from the city for you," said the partner, nearly cutting him off. "What were you doing out there at that hour?" "He's not going to remember, Sato. Amnesia, right?" Ryoma held out a hand and glanced over, forcing him to table the issue for now. "Relax, it's fine." Haruka didn't need his memory to see that Sato had a chip on his shoulder. With effort, he held his tongue, wondering what they were about to accuse him of doing. At least let it be something interesting, part of him hoped. Please, there's going to be unpaid parking tickets, another part thought back. If they're not cops, pachinko debt. Turning back to the folder, the stocky detective thumbed through a collection of documents. "Let's see. You're listed as a professor with the University of Tokyo, working there for the last 10 years. Spent 3 years teaching abroad in the United States." That one got a curious crook of the brow. "Any of that ring a bell?" "Somewhat. I think it was somewhere in California." Honest doubt slipped in. He couldn't do much more than guess. "Probably Los Angeles. I'm sorry, I don't recall. The rest of that sounds about right." "How's your English?" The question took his mind off the interrogation, and he combed through the void for a phrase or two. Fortunately, those lessons had seemingly taken root deep in his gray matter, and he switched tongues with only slight hesitation. "It's been a while." Haruka could tell he was out of practice, but there was comfort with what he did know. Returning to Japanese, he added, "I think I worked with some of the T-Sol people." "I see. You mostly taught history, correct?" "I believe so." Sato jumped in again, looking over at his partner. "We don't have all day. Ask him about Tanamichi," he urged. The slight turn of his head showed a dark outline behind the sunglasses. A bruise around the eye, maybe. He kept fidgeting, occasionally tapping his foot. "We'll get to that." Ryoma was firmer this time, but still didn't seem fully in charge. He shuffled the papers, drew another photo, and dealt it to the teacher. "Can you confirm this is also your car?" The name Tanamichi also tugged on his mind, but all thoughts were overwhelmed by dread as Haruka took the photograph. It was a grayscale image of a parking garage at night, with a blown-up shot of his car pulling in. The low angle didn't show him, but someone was in the passenger seat. Knowing nothing of the context or even who the person was, he nonetheless felt a chill sweep through him, goosebumps crawling up his arms. "Is this your car, Masamoto?" He took extra time to think. Not that it helped much. Apparently so." The regret is instant. A few voices already yelling at him. The rest push for more details. "What's this about, detective?" The partner spoke up again, reaching over and pointing at the passenger. "And the woman in the car, Tanamichi Reiko. You recognize her?" Like a key turning a lock, the name fit right in, so the door stayed shut. The night itself was a file not found, and the photo was too grainy for a clear look. He couldn't even tell the passenger was a her. Yet the name had meaning, bound to a worry deep inside that he didn't understand. Whatever it was, he had kept it with the most precious of things. His face couldn't help but react, a moment of clarity in the eyes, throat tensing around a swallow. Still, something urged him to keep this one close to the vest, no matter how obvious the tell. Don't say it, don't even think it. Don't get cute or provoke them. Just look lost, play dumb. It helped that he was lost, of course, and dumb didn't require too much playing. "You know her, don't you?" Sato insisted. Surely he had known her at some point. Harnessing that confusion, he let the hand with the photo fall, dry lips parting with a little pop. "I don't know," he murmured, staring down at the grainy photo. Short hair, suit jacket, nothing else to go on but that strange feeling. Friend, coworker maybe? I'm afraid I'm drawing a blank here. "Bullshit, he's faking it. He's right there in the car with her." "Your friend is in serious trouble, Masamoto. She stole something very important, and it's in your interest to help us find her." The pressure belied weakness. What was happening in the photograph? Where was it taken? By whom? Why was that a crime? Was there a crime? They'd been rather coy on that, Haruka had noticed. I'm sorry, I don't remember. I don't even know what happened to me, he said in a low, exhausted voice. A fatigue he felt down to the core. When he looked up, there was no defiance in his bespectacled gaze. Just that terrible void. I mean, I can get the doc back. She can explain it better. He made no move for the call button, but it sat a moment's press away. A long, dangerous silence followed, with only the buzzing of lights and a vent fan for noise. Both men watched him closely, barely moving or even blinking. One stare was cold, the other seethed. Haruka merely... Typos. Nothing else is helping me clean these up just a little bit. Haruka merely slumped against the pillows, a man already beaten, showing he had nothing in his hand. And from what he could tell, they didn't have much either. Lucky him. Finally, Ryoma stepped back, collecting the photo and tucking the folder away. Never mind. He's not going to be helpful right now, he replied, his frustration muted but real. But forget it, Sato. We'll find her some other way. He reached into his jacket and produced a small business card. He clicked a pen, held it like a knife. Here's our number. I advise you to contact us if there's anything you remember. The word carried obvious doubts. Haruka imagined a mental split over whether he was faking it. He wasn't the only one with suspicions. Whatever they really wanted to know, the teacher guessed it had little to do with him or his wrecked car. Ryoma scratched down a phone number and then handed it over, the front side listing a police station downtown. What did she take? The teacher asked, on the off chance they weren't lying. The only thing that matters, came the cryptic reply. Tripping over the tongue there. Come on, let's go. Sato lagged behind his partner, slow to turn his back on Haruka. If he wanted the last word, he didn't bother voicing it, though the glare behind the sunglasses said plenty. That language, he also understood. We'll be in touch. The door clicked shut, leaving the patient on his own again. Off in the distance, a loudspeaker could be heard, summoning a doctor to a trauma unit. He drew a fresh breath, bunched his fists in the sheets, and tried to fight off the shiver threading up his spine. Yeah, it can definitely help proofreading to read it under different circumstances. It's silly how much more you can find sometimes just by temporarily changing font or something. Yeah. Well, yeah, this is why an editor is invaluable. It's looking at something with fresh eyes, and it even helps to take a look at something long after you've written it and see what reads differently to you. What do you notice now that you're not focused on writing it? What do you pay attention to? It helps to have distance from your work to actively correct things. Anyway. Masamoto-san, this is Detective Maeda Shizue, 5th Precinct. We've located your car. Unfortunately, the damage is significant, and it's likely a total loss. Her recorded voice was little comfort as it piped over his phone, the third voicemail out of 5. The first had been from Junsei, mostly echoing what he'd told him at the store. Someone had been following Haruka, and going from the photographs, they'd been doing so recently. The second, apparently, was from his mother. From what he could tell, a sweet old lady currently enjoying a river cruise in Germany. Explaining all this to her would give him new and exciting reasons to hate being alive. Not a word until you know what this is, his thoughts warned. That sweet old lady still practices archery. The detective continued. The vehicle's been brought to TCSJ Towing Company. Please contact them as soon as possible to claim any property, and I'd like to speak with you when you have time to do so. Phone in one hand, coffee in the other, Haruka stood back from the line of the train platform. The hospital clerk had given him some general information and his personal effects, mercifully including the apartment keys and train pass. His windbreaker, tattered and blood-stained, had to go. Ditto the button-down. What was left, t-shirt and trousers, worn-out gym shoes, would suffice until he got home. All he had to do now was get there, choke down some food, and then crash and hope things made more sense tomorrow. Hollowed out by the day, he had little energy to do any serious digging. Still, there was little else to do while he waited, and muscle memory had finally given him the phone code, 4015. Haruka tapped replay on the current message, and the date and time only amplified his fears. Whoever those two men were, they weren't law enforcement. A shame he couldn't have put money on it. So who were they? Private security? Organized crime? The John Woo fantasy didn't seem quite so far-fetched now. Don't kid yourself, boss. You wouldn't know what to do with a gun, let alone two. He sighed and took a sip from his coffee, nourishing him like it ran on the stuff, which he probably did. Yeah, you know what? I think we can bump the arrow up a little bit more. I haven't lived this interesting a life, but the introspective nature of this man's thoughts are an obvious parallel, let's say. Anyway, buzzkill. Seriously though, what the hell did I get myself into? Hard to say. Troubled by association, perhaps. A canned announcer warned of the incoming train, and the line straightened out. The next voicemail played, sounding like some telemarketing thing. He quickly skipped to the last one, time stamped for yesterday at around noon. A young woman spoke, her voice rough and firm, her cadence rushed and punchy. He knew right away who it was. Hey, Teach, it's me. Listen, something came up. I'm going to be out of town for a few days. Just hang on to that bag for now, yeah? I'll explain when I get back, probably Friday. Something lanced through his brain, a synapse firing through the imprint of a bad memory. The bag fell somewhere in that missing space, his gut twisting into knots. He'd failed her before. She hadn't hung up yet. There was hesitation, uncertainty. She didn't know how to finish. I'll see you later, okay? His throat tightened, eyes shut for a moment. After that was some telemarketing thing. He hit delete right away. Her message filled in a few blanks, creating an outline of what those men were after, and roughly how much trouble he was in. Whoever this Reiko was to him, she trusted him with something important. His goal became crystal clear, even if the why of it eluded him. The train slid up to the platform with a rush of wind, brakes squealing and bringing it to a stop. Doors opened with a pop and a hiss, waiting for him. Through the departing crowd, a young girl in a high school uniform stepped onto the platform, chocolate-toned hair falling to her shoulders in smooth tresses. She looked up from her phone and glanced at him in passing, not more than a second or two. In his mind, closer to a minute. With a smile, she slipped away, disappearing into a wall of people making for the escalator. He blinked, the encounter gone like a mirage, the details soon lost. Somehow, she had seemed familiar. Back in the present, the line of passengers going in began to move. Okay, get home, find the bag, call Junsei, get some rest, he thought. The grand list of shit to do had to start somewhere. Improvise from there. Simple, right? Don't forget the most important thing, boss. He nodded and put his phone away, and joined the line as it pushed into the train. Those words he knew by heart, etched somewhere he could never forget. Don't let her down. Let's see. What are we at? Hour 9, hour 14 on the timer. I think we can go one more chapter. So yeah, the idea is to kind of have parallel narrative tracks where half the book is written in the in a series of flashbacks leading up to the crash, and half of them are events following that as he tries to piece together what happened. And the point is that each one has kind of a companion piece feeding into memory. Like the first one, he gets a call from his friend Junsei. The next chapter is about his relationship with that character, along with some background information. The point is, these events are relatively low in stakes, yet with the sense that something is happening around this character, if not necessarily to him just yet. And in the present, the thing has happened, and now he needs to find out what that is. Anyway, we'll do one more chapter. Why not? Chapter 4, Shelter. Friday, 29 September 2017. 10 days before the crash. Weary eyes gazed through the windshield, raindrops tapping on the glass only to be swept away by the wipers. At this time of night, the lights that drew the tourists were mostly cold. Train lines were shutting down, and the crowds had thinned to a desperate few willing to brave the storm. A cloaking mist shrouded the streets past a few blocks, and he didn't see the figure huddled up against the rail pylon until he pulled up to a stop. Luckily, he was expecting company. Haruka flashed his brights. 121, like the call had said. The figure leapt up immediately, struggling to balance an umbrella and briefcase as it raced for the car. He gave a welcoming smile and popped the door locks. An ill-timed wind, however, tried to pull the umbrella away, spraying the would-be passenger with a face full of rain. "Ah! Son of a—" she sputtered, pushing the briefcase in first before struggling to collapse the umbrella. "All the fucking times!" With some effort, she finally wedged herself into the car and closed the door with a frustrated sigh. He tried not to chuckle. Truly he did. "Hey, Reiko," he said, turning the radio down. She glanced sharply at him as she buckled up. "Just drive, Teach." An easy tap on the gas and they were off. She fussed a bit more. straightening out her short hair, adjusting her charcoal black blazer, aiming the heater to dry off her trousers. Even late night real estate transactions carried a certain expectation of class, which wasn't quite in her vocabulary unless absolutely necessary. He hadn't expected her to end up doing this for a living, but couldn't say it was terribly surprising. The serpent tattoo creeping out of her sleeve had been there on her last day of class. Had it been 6 years already? He'd love to know where the time went. Hey, thanks for coming, Reiko said, throwing him a grateful look at last, or the closest those brown eyes could muster to one. It's been a hell of a day. No trouble, he assured her, rolling to a stop at an intersection. Where are we headed? Take a right here. Just drop me off outside Conda Station. I can walk the rest of the way. Haruka hit the turn signal. His tires skidded briefly as they pulled into the turn. You sure? I don't mind bringing you over, especially in this. Are you sure? These aren't exactly kids dicking around between classes, Teach. You don't have to get involved if you don't want to. The briefcase was an elephant in the room. Something undoubtedly illegal. Excuse me. Something undoubtedly illegal, or near enough that he was better off not knowing. All he could do was shrug. Yeah, but it wouldn't feel right. Cabs would rip you off on the ride home. All right, your call. We're going to a parking garage about a block from the station. I'll point it out. He gave the gas a little pump, squeezing through a light before it changed. You told him your car broke down? I swear to God, I just had that thing in the shop. It came out in a snarl, gritted teeth and all. Late to a meeting with Kobayashi's guys because the fucking timing belt broke. I thought I was joking at first. Then came the yelling. I'm gonna strangle that mechanic. It happens. The ride was smooth in spite of the weather. Rain-slick streets and drawn steel shutters passing easily outside the window. He left the radio on, but just barely. The current track a mere mumble of some inoffensive pop song. Reiko seized control and steered it towards something electronic and acid jazzy, a calming beat and warm lyrics. Music was one of the few things she could focus on in school, with a spread of taste that spanned the globe. He nearly lost track of her when the DJ gig fell through. A shame. She'd sounded like she enjoyed it. Rain began pouring in sheets over the windshield, demanding the wipers double their efforts. He'd struggled to say that she was a good person, but somewhere in there she was trying. He wouldn't have otherwise bothered saying hello in the street that one day, then buying her coffee, listening to her troubles, offering advice. She wasn't his student anymore. He didn't know her anything. The right thing to do was just move on, let her fall into the cracks, and try again with the next student. So, you gonna ask? Haruka always struggled with letting go. Ask what? What's in the briefcase? She gave it a shake for emphasis. The side of his mouth quirked in amusement. Thank you, no. I like my knees where they are. She looked away in a bit of a huff. We don't really do that, you know. I mean, not often. He raised a hand, waving off any curiosity. Better you don't tell me. I'd rather not lie if someone asks what I know. Kobayashi was a name he'd heard through Junsei, and that was enough. The stakes were probably low. The average person would be heartbroken to know legitimate business was sometimes utterly banal, but it was still safer this way. Reiko made a noise that sounded like agreement, her gaze drawn outside to the world passing them by. Period there. She exhaled on the window and drew absently in the fog, and a minute of silence passed between them as the song faded out. You know what throws me off about you, Teach? She finally asked, in a clipped tone that suggested she'd come up with the answer a while ago. Why are you here? You should be sitting down for dinner right now with a family in a nice house somewhere. You should have someone to ask about your day, and you ask about theirs, and, I don't know, whatever normal people do with their time. Where's the fun in that? He asked with an audible smirk. Come on, I know this is a hassle for you. You're out here on a shitty night, helping a failed student who fell in with the... She caught herself, her head falling slightly. It still felt weird to say it aloud. With the bad guys. You're a good guy, Teach. What are you doing here? Haruka shrugged, watching the rain pelt the glass. It'd take too much effort to lie, and he was never that good at it anyway. But that didn't make digging the truth out any easier. His mental foreman worked the crew overtime, driving shovels and pickaxes into old, hardened dirt, the detritus that collects around the real reasons people keep making the same mistakes. Eventually you hit the core of it, and only then you realize just how big and basic it is, how it's informed everything you've ever done. With him, it was deceptively simple. "'Cause I'm a mess up here," he eventually admitted, tapping his forehead for emphasis. "I look normal 'cause nobody ever asks what I'm thinking." What are you thinking then? She pressed. He sighed like he was 20 years older. That I wound up working for the thing I hate, said the teacher after a long pause. They passed some suited pedestrians huddled around an umbrella, a glowing karaoke sign drawing them like a beacon in the rain. Look around on the train. Count the dress shirts, the blazers, the ties. You'd think the city has a dress code. Reiko scoffed. You should see the office I'm in. Paper stacks like Mount Fuji. Most of these guys have gone years without touching a weapon. Or their girlfriends. The last bit carried a hint of bitterness, something Haruka didn't know what to do with. Yeah, society doesn't want thinkers, and that applies to, well, what you do as well, he said, focusing on the main point. They want workers. Obedient, interchangeable, disposable. People they can use up, toss aside, and drop another in place without missing a beat. And they'll pound on that square peg until it goes through the round hole. Or break it trying. She didn't have to work hard to see the through line connecting them. The briefcase was a lead weight in her lap, uncomfortable as it shifted through another turn. Her arms folded over her chest, quietly listening as her teacher unburdened himself. I tried to rebel in my own ways and just got a broken arm and worried parents for the trouble. Fucking idiot I was. Never forgave myself for hurting them. He didn't say fuck often, and he meant it when he did. Been taking the path of least resistance ever since. Doing what was expected of me, playing nice, keeping my head down. The one time I felt something. It was a woman, so we're clear. It didn't end well. Junsei told me. I saw she won her campaign. Yeah, I'm glad. She'll be good at it. His hands pushed on the steering wheel, as if using it to keep him from slouching in his seat. Anyway, you think I'm some typical guy that should be well on his way to the house, the steady career, the wife, the kids cramming for entrance exams. I'm not. Well, 1 out of 4, sure, but not upstairs. I just filed off the rough edges so life would stop hitting me. So why this then? Why now? She asked, sensing a hole in the story. Driving her to a deal hardly gelled with trying to fit in. 'Cause, well, it's no way to live. Nobody gets out of bed wanting to be another worker bee, but you find out you've been doing it so long you don't know how to stop. A red light stopped him, gave him time to reach under his glasses and pinch the bridge of his nose. He was due for a new pair. You're just so damn tired all the time. All you want to do is make it to the end of the day, the week, the month, and I realize I've been spending the last 10 years like that. That's why I'm here. It's exhausting. She held her tongue until there was a nice padding of air, easily destroyed with a single word. Bullshit. He crooked an eyebrow. Beg your pardon? Reiko shot him a challenging look. There's more to it than that. You offered to help, right from that day we met again. I was just a dropout to you. You had no reason to worry about me. You reached out, and that takes a little more than just being tired. There was a hint of offense in her tone, a sharpness she reserved for someone that had wronged her. It wasn't a short list. Hey, all that was true, swear to God, he said, a hand raised. His men kept digging, carving out the less convenient parts of the truth. Somewhat more sheepishly, he added, but I suppose you're not entirely wrong there. She arched a brow, driving her own rhetorical pick into the ground. Mm-hmm. Got a thing for bad girls, huh? Okay, that's definitely not it. It was only a partial lie, which kept him from flubbing it like usual. Come on, this has midlife crisis written all over it. The needling was somewhere between playful and sincere. She nodded to the window. Green light. He looked up, jolted, seeing the green through rain-splattered glass. A tap of the pedal and they were on the way again. True, Reiko had her charms. God had cursed him with a weakness for tomboys and women in suits, and in the right context, with no nearby blunt objects, he'd even admit to it. That said, sex was the last thing on his mind at the moment. Right, you got me, he said in a tired deadpan. I'm here because I want to throw my career out the window, lose every friend I still have, and get six kinds of arrested. After your father and your boyfriend take turns skinning me alive. She blinked, taken aback. Her words hit something sensitive, but the reaction was too raw to be an act. He didn't look agitated so much as weary, stuck reading the same chapter of his life over and over. The mention of the boyfriend put her on the defensive, and she fell back into the seat and stared ahead, losing herself in the sway of the wipers. Haruka wasn't the only one with fault lines under the surface. Ex-boyfriend, Reiko eventually mumbled. Pardon? Ex-boyfriend. Didn't work out with Kenji. Her head had sank slightly, the words terse, the bitterness subtle. It was all barely a month old, the relationship itself not more than 6, ending from 1,000 little things adding up. The less she had to say about it, the better. Haruka put a few pieces together, keeping the picture to himself. Oh, uh, I'm sorry. Forget it. Reiko could easily have meant it for herself. She looked to her old teacher again, forcibly changing the subject. So, why then? Why help me? Why any of this? The air that left his lungs was defeated, and he shrugged with his hands on the wheel. I don't know. Maybe I just saw a little of myself when you bounced off the material. That felt important. He ordered his team to keep digging around there. Back then, I was lucky to have the help I did, and I think I didn't know how to help you. Maybe I'm just not that good a teacher. But I saw you needed help now, and, well, here I am. Come on, I can't be that simple. She retreated again, almost pouting. Nobody helps out like this for no reason. Why not? He asked, glancing at her. You really think you're that bad? Reiko didn't answer, her head rolling to one side and her eyes gazing blankly through the glass. More fog on the window. Her finger was drawn to it, making lines that wouldn't last. The entrance to a park sped by, a rare bit of green amidst the sea of concrete and lights, all of it deluged by blankets of rain. They were close to where she was going, and near where she'd planned to stop him. Secretly, she was glad he'd insisted. A 3-block walk in the rain didn't look the least bit appealing, and she wasn't ready to leave just yet. Not without a little honesty in return. He deserved that much. She hadn't enjoyed most of her attempt at college, Haruka's history lessons included, but there was something about his presence that she liked. He rarely judged, rarely blamed. The soft timbre of his voice almost irritatingly soothing. His patience had limits, but she really had to dig to find them. Even punching his door and cursing up a storm hadn't gotten there. It took years for her to admit she wished he taught something else, something she could perhaps follow more easily. Instead, that day had been the last straw, and the last she'd see of him for years. Figures he'd spent those same years beating himself up from the other end, blaming himself for failing her. Self-hatred was something else they had in common. A whole other song had passed by the time she spoke again, in a voice far quieter than either was used to. Hey, Teach. I'm sorry about the trouble I caused. Taken aback was putting it lightly. Haruka's brow twitched, and inside his head was a mental record scratch. Reiko didn't apologize for anything, even when she knew better. It's fine, he eventually managed, waving her off. Take her right here, she said, sitting up. Her hands clamped together over the briefcase, squeezing each other tightly, and her words grew insistent. And it's not fine. You were only trying to help, and I realized that way too late. Now, he realized, would be a good time to be reassuring. You're still a one piece, right? He threw her a gentle smile. He seemed to have an endless supply of them. It's not that late. Trust me. It is for me. If you want to apologize, you can start by listening now, he said in his teacher's voice, deepening with a hint of authority he otherwise had no business wielding. Look, the world's a fucked up place. People are complicated, messy. You can do everything you're expected to do and still make things worse. You can work for the bad guys and not be a bad guy, girl, whatever. Now you have to watch yourself, sure. Good intentions on the road to hell and all, but you're not some cackling villain just because you're not walking the straight and narrow. Traffic thickened as they passed one of Kondo Station's exits, though only a few umbrellas were trickling out. The luckless ones who'd missed the last trains. You have more time than you'd think, he added. Just spend it wisely. Make the choices you can live with. That's all. Her head fell in a nod, and she shifted in her seat. Chewing on the words took more time than she had. The large, blocky gray of a parking garage soon appeared down the street, and she pointed a steady finger at it. There it is. 3rd floor, Section H. The car rolled easily to their destination, something flighty and cheerful coming on the radio. At last the rain yielded to the protection of concrete, Haruka's window sinking with a whir. He tapped a button and took a ticket, then drove under the rising gate. 200 yen for half an hour was a small price for peace of mind. Together they found the ramp up, a leisurely twirl twice around a central pillar. Lots were full, but brake lights were scarce, and off in the corner he saw them, working stiffs in suits and coats, tired eyes and bad posture. They'd fit right in with the salarymen they'd passed along the way. She found herself humming along with the radio, her fingers drumming on the briefcase. Eventually, she motioned him to stop and released her seatbelt with a click. Flash your brights twice. He did so. I'll be right back, don't worry. Sorry, I worry about everything. Speaking of which, why did you call me over everyone else you could have asked? Did they all say no? Reiko froze, her hand on the handle. It was her turn to clam up, a warmth in her face that she attributed to the car heater. There were reasons, to be sure. Her other friends wouldn't understand. Her parents would probably turn her down, and she'd crawl over broken glass before calling Kenji again. She just wasn't sure those were the real reasons, and what she feared more than not knowing why was knowing exactly why. Thanks, Teach, she mumbled, tugging on the handle, hoping the chilly night would dispel the blush. He nodded, pretending he hadn't asked. I'll be right here. The door closed with a slam and she made her way across the garage, briefcase in hand. She was expected, the goons turning to greet her. One tapped his watch impatiently. It wasn't a terribly interesting show, a peaceful handoff after some muffled pleasantries. One pointed to the teacher's car as she swatted his hand away, almost protectively. The radio kept playing, some quiet trip-hop song that she'd know better, a subtle bass beat, comforting lyrics delivered in a soothing tone. Haruka had to chuckle at his foolishness. In the end, staring through glass was all he could do. An observer, a creature of habit. He was flirting, but not with Reiko. Trouble was the dumb crush of his life, and he never managed more than fleeting dalliances with it before pulling back. She wasn't wrong. He was no delinquent anymore, but there had always been, and would always be, a part of him drawn off the beaten path himself. One foot on each side of the tracks, sometimes a camera in hand, and sometimes balancing on the rail just to see if he could. It was the only way forward that didn't slowly drive him insane. She made her way back to the car, her burden lightened, and climbed back in with a lively spark in her eyes. And done. See? Told you it'd be quick. Never doubted you, he replied, taking his foot off the brake. So what'd you tell them? About what? About me. I saw them pointing. She leaned against the window, and he saw her smiling in the reflection. Calling it girlish was a stretch, but she didn't just hand those out. Nothing. Can we maybe stop and get some coffee on the way back? Say what one will about trouble, but her sweet tooth had found good company. Oh, I guess we can, he said with fake reluctance, stepping off the path for a while longer. Got a preference? Her smile grew. Just drive, Teach. So yeah, that's about as far as I got in sequence. There are a few other chapters written further on, including the very end of the story. But the hard part, of course, is going to be writing between them, connecting the threads. What is happening with Reiko in the present? Why is the past significance in what led up to the crash? What's the involvement of his ex-girlfriend? What are the guys that are looking for him really after? I want to drop these things while also emphasizing this story is going to be psychological in nature. It's going to be delving into the character and figuring out why he decided to get involved in this and how much he actually knew going in. And also, I wanted a little bit of a hint that of a surreal nature. Like, there's little clues here and there that he's not quite perceiving things normally. The way time kind of stretches and dilates around him. The idea is this is partly a function of how he thinks and partly a function of his trauma from the crash. There's nothing supernatural about it. I'll come right out and say that, but there is something wrong about the way his mind works that will actually be an asset in this situation. There's nothing. Basically, I'm trying to avoid the trope of the amnesiac having skills that are conveniently useful in the situation. He is what he appears to be. He just happens to be wrapped up in something that wouldn't normally be anywhere near someone like him. So it's about charting a path from there to here and using the dual tracks to explore that psychology and the world around him. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. God only knows if we'll actually make any progress on this, but I'll give it the old college try. We'll be back to Claire Obscure on... Let me check the calendar. Next showing will be... the 13th. So I'll see you all then. Have a good night, and thanks for listening.